This is day 4 of the April 95 7-day retreat in Springwater. A talk like this morning, will take a certain course, which is not mapped out or planned. Certain things to talk about may be jotted down and looked at, and then the talk proceeds on its own. Not totally independent from all the input that has happened during this retreat, past retreats, and one's whole lifetime. And yet, what is said in this talk may not feel appropriate for someone this moment. So how can one listen openly, even if what is being said either doesn't make sense, isn't clear, sounds confusing, or is confusing? Or a resistance developed to what is being suggested? How can one remain open? Is that possible? And just let go by what is flowing anyways. I'm thinking in particular of 2 questions that have come up, or statements. Which is not for the first time it comes up in retreats like this, normally, usually. In listening quietly, the mind somehow resists to question at the same time. Listening quietly, openly, with the flow, so to speak. Why question something? A question may be brought up with intensity during a talk, and one feels rattled or rattled out of an open flow. The way, if I remember correctly, one person put it, it's sort of like having to shift gears from open listening to pondering something, now looking at something as it happens in myself, and feeling a certain resistance to that shifting of gears. It's always good that someone brings this up so it can be further clarified and gone into here together, because what one person brings up usually holds for most of us, all of us, at some time or other. In this description, it feels like I ought to shift gears, and there's a resistance to doing this. Is there in that the feeling that I ought to now do something, what is being suggested? And the power is very strong, the power of suggestion. Don't just listen, I think I said something like that. Don't just listen, but look at the same time whether what is said is so. And looking can only take place here in oneself. And yet at this moment, it feels like an unwanted or maybe unnecessary effort to execute this switch. And we're not asking for a deliberate, intentional effort to do something. It may be this moment or at another moment that this switch happens on its own. And here it is, happening in oneself. It's seen clearly without any effort to do so. And therefore no resistance. And therefore no irritation. Or being down on oneself or down on the one who is giving the talk. All of this is not necessary when there is effortless awareness, which happens on its own in a marvelous way that is not explainable. Similar thing happened for someone when yesterday or the day before I cannot recall the whole context, but I do recall asking whether there was really a thinker of the thoughts. And it was sort of a more parenthetical question. It was not the main topic at the moment. But just throwing in this question, whether our strong belief in a thinker, that I am thinking my thoughts, which is our common, collective, and also individual assumption. I think I am the thinker of my thoughts. Whether this is really true. And if this question grabs one, as it does some people, even before they come here, then can one investigate? What is this thinker? Is there a thinker? Let the question sit there and watch. As right now at this moment, the thinker is a thought, isn't it? We're all thinking that there's a thinker, we're talking about it. And that thought that there's a thinker is very palpable. Whether there is one or not needs to be found out directly. And maybe the way the question was just thrown in there, in the midst of something else, which I don't remember, was irritating to someone. And looking whether there was a thinker, there was none. But a lot of thoughts and irritation generated by the thoughts, that is very observable. Palpable. The way the thoughts spin out and the irritation in their wake. But this is just used right now to lead to a more general observation or discussion of what is questioning. We have age-old ideas about what questioning is. Our whole educational system depends on questions and answers. Questions asked by the teacher, answers given by the student, not so often the other way around. And inbuilt into this educational system also with parents, of course, or ministers, priests, inbuilt in the system is that I have to give answers. That's what a question is all about. The obligation to answer it. The pressure. Sometimes not from my own interest. I could care less. But when the pyramids in Egypt were built, but I have to answer it. I have to know it. because in that case it could be either a quick memory or no memory of the date. Some questions involve more thinking, going through the files in the mind. But the pressure is there to come up with an answer the moment the question is asked, and a pressure is set up, a certain irritation to do away with a question by answering it, to make the grade. Can one observe such pressure or obligation in connection with coming here and questions being asked? Feeling maybe, if this is not a question that stirs one at this moment, feeling imposed upon. Maybe that is so. Then to see it, bring it to light, let it be felt. Maybe ask a question about it in a meeting, or make a statement about it. Of course, in spiritual training, what we call spiritual training centers, questions play a very big part. And very often the method of asking the question is repeating it. Repeating the question with intensity. Somebody brought that up in a meeting yesterday. I forgot again the context. I need to question intensely. Who am I? Or whatever was the question. And there's training behind that. Past experience of being exhorted to question intensely, passionately. And the technique usually being repetition of the question on the exhalation. With every exhalation, to inaudibly voice the question or a part of the question, standing for the whole question. Maybe placing the whole questioning process to a certain spot in one's body. And it's amazing how these spots vary. Recently we had a workshop, and someone told me that her training was to place the question at the top of her head. I've read other practices, it's the tip of the nose, and of course those of us who've had Zen training, it's to put it below the navel. Really push it there with will, with intention, with energy. Hoping that the answer will reveal itself. Is there that hope, that expectation? That with this intense questioning, in the proper manner, one will come upon the question, upon the answer. So all those various training backgrounds are here now in sitting and hearing about questioning. So, is it possible for a moment to suspend, as it were, the previous experience with question and answer, which have conditioned this body-mind? Is it possible, in spite of the conditioning, being aware of it to some extent, by looking at it, talking about it together, let it go into abeyance and listen to a different way of questioning. Giving it a chance by open listening. Maybe questioning can also mean not knowing. As simple as that. If I don't know what I am, then what am I? If I don't know it, doesn't the whole state of being turn into something like a question, not voicing a particular series of words, but not knowing, and yet there are sounds, there are sensations, there is ongoing being, but I don't know what it is. Whatever word suggests itself, realizing that's just words, learned descriptions, learned explanations. But what is everything really? What am I really, truly? Beyond all the learned descriptions and explanations and words that the brain so willingly throws out. And the first response that comes to what am I really is, I don't know. I know words and explanations and descriptions and scriptures and anatomy. But is that all I am? I don't know. Maybe that's all I am, maybe not. Maybe I'm more than that, maybe I'm much less than that. None of that, maybe. So, can the body-mind enter into a state of not knowing and wondering, which need not necessarily find its expression in an explicit question? Maybe there is an explicit question, maybe there's not. There's just an open wondering without knowing. Which is a state of openness and receptivity to what's there, maybe in a new way. Because the known is seen to be memories and words, thoughts and descriptions, which do not convey or cover all that's happening. The howling of the wind, of course, words are used, and we usually revel in the words, because words can be so powerful in stirring the emotions and the memories. But that is not the same as pure listening, allowing the words to come and go. They come so quickly, so automatically, as do the judgments and likes and dislikes. But to let that run as it will, and the openness is there, undivided from what is happening. Yesterday in that meeting, of the group, in which someone spoke of this resistance to shifting gears in the course of a talk, with the silence and stillness and hearing the breathing and sounds. Someone else said, and of course I cannot repeat it accurately verbatim, just the essence of it. In listening, I don't worry about understanding it all or doing something. And therefore it's not at all difficult to stay with the breathing and the sounds. Because there's no worry of having to do something with the words that are being spoken. Just let them come in. Let them happen. And I found from experience that maybe a week later, a month later, something will click. So even there's no conscious dealing with it, something is happening. In the presence of listening to words in a quiet setting and words that come out of a quiet setting, a quiet body-mind. The question of effort has been brought up by several people. Does it take effort to come to this quiet attention, open awareness? Actually, one person asked it twice. The first time we left the question open, for whatever reason. The second time the person came to a meeting, he reported walking as it was snowing through the upper field, the woods, the silence of it, really experiencing the silence of snow and woods and sounds, or no sounds. The wholeness of that. And no effort, the effortlessness of it. Now, gotta be very careful not to claim anything that's the cause of it or not the cause of it. We don't know. Whether years and years and years of quiet sitting, attending retreats, quiet sitting at home, have a relationship to this emergence of stillness, quietness, silence, which is what unites all of us. It pervades everything. Silence within is the silence of the woods and snow, and the people walking or sitting. Their minds may be full of turmoil, but yet one feels the silence permeating everyone and everything. Is that related to hours and years, eons of effort? Who can say yes or no? One has to find out for oneself what one needs to do at this moment. The best that I can say, and that's not very much, is when there is not this effortlessness, we inevitably make an effort. In one direction or another. That is observable. When it's no effort, it's no effort. Without that, it's effort. So what's the difference? and making effort. There's a strong sense of me separate from my cherished goal, what I want to attain, or keep, hold, preserve. Always me struggling to get there. And energies applied willfully, thoughtfully, technically, in many different ways to get to where I want to be. Which includes fighting where I don't want to be, fighting what appears as distractions, sometimes wicked distractions. The energy expended to fight the distractions, to keep the concentration pure from distraction, which is our eon-old fight between good and evil. In this effortless state, everything is what it is. And oneself not of importance. Not as the fighter, the doer, the accomplisher, the victor or the loser. That is all quiet. That movement, that network is disconnected as it seems. And the energy is wholesome, is here. Not here to get there, but here. This instant of no time, no sense of time, which is the dropping off of division and fragmentation. Now, describing that in words, does it set up an irritation? Either I want that, or why does she talk about it? I don't have it. Makes me feel inferior. Can one watch such thoughts come up without needing to do anything about them? Let them see, let them come and go like the clouds. We need not take any position in relationship to what is being said, but just listen. Let it be heard and let it go with the sun streaming through the windows at this moment. Next moment, the clouds may cover it again. Several people in this retreat have brought up questions about trust or faith. One person saying, I just read your article in this anniversary issue of the newsletter, in which you say that even though you have never trusted anything in your life, always worried. See, I don't even remember what I said exactly. But I do remember that I always have always worried. I was the worrywart of the family. And told that I was that, which was an obligation to keep being that. And yet, in connection with this center, ever since leaving the Zen center, there has not been a worry about whether this will work out. It was rather, let's see whether it works out. If it works out, fine. If it does not, all right. And one could call that a trust. A trust in this work of this moment. Could I say that there is trust in the work of this moment? Yes, there is. I can say that. Unconditionally. Oh, I see the pitfalls of trust in something, how the mind can start spinning to make something that one can ideationally believe in. But the trust is precisely not in the idea of it, but in the happening of it, the doing of it, the seeing of it, the listening of it, the openness of it. And what that brings in its wake, all on its own. One person who has reported to me during recent retreats considerable difficulty with an office, staff in the office. Difficulties, upsets, reorganization, difficulty in relationship among the staff and those who are directing the office. He said, don't you have, I read this too in this newsletter, don't you have staff? Aren't there problems? I don't have staff. We don't have staff. People are working here to keep this retreat center operating. And obviously, where people live together, work together, spend the whole time together, difficulties arise. Naturally. Or people leaving, crucial people who one thinks the center can't work without this person or that person, and the person leaving. Who will take his or her place? And over the years, it's more than 10 years that we have operated. There was 3 years before then, if one counts time. It has always worked out. We never had to close up the place. And not only has it worked out, but we have all learned tremendously in the process about ourselves, about each other, about working together, listening to each other, or not listening to each other, what happens. So it's been an unfolding process which permeated with retreat time, meeting time, groups, and private, and this extraordinarily marvelous setting with winds howling, snow and sun at the same time. In this marvelous setting, the way I see it, things are blossoming, even if it may not appear like this for one moment, for one person. So, the way the question was put yesterday in one meeting is, you have said sometime, person I may be even referring to a tape, that you trust in this process. Is that what you said? I said, yes, I do. But let me be very careful, always trying to be very careful with words. Because a misunderstood word does mischief or damage. And it happens. Misunderstandings happen. That's one of the things, one of the most painful things I've learned ever since this whole venture started. Inevitably, misunderstandings happen. And either we clear them up or we don't. It's painful if it continues to fester. So, being very careful with words, let's look at this thing of a process, the word process. Having just described, ever so briefly, leaving the center and eventually building this place and holding retreats here with people like you, that is an unfolding process. And yes, there's faith in that. It has worked. If tomorrow it doesn't work anymore, there must be a reason for it, and then we'll meet that. I don't feel invested, and therefore hanging on. At least I don't think I do. Whether one really is invested and attached can only reveal itself when the split happens, or the departure happens, the death occurs. Then one will see about attachment and investment. But at least in thought, in imagination, seems quite clear that for whatever reasons, people not interested anymore in coming here, or no one here to do the work to keep the place operating, then something has to happen, and we will meet that. Maybe no more Springwater Center. It's not a dreaded idea. It's something that can be met if it should happen. I don't believe it does or will, but it can any time. Who knows? So the existence in time of a group of people, of a building, a program, maybe a new cabin will spring up this spring, a single cabin, and we'll see what happens with that. It's interesting and thrilling. What will happen with it? How will it look? Will people come? Sitting there looking down on the ravine, down the ravine, and maybe see the trickle of water run by, hear it. So there's an unfolding process, and there's trust in this process, which I've never experienced with any other in my life. Although I do trust Kyle completely. Always have. But this silent being, this openness without division, or a sudden insight that this is so. No fragmentation, no me or you, but just what is there, and seems to have always been here. That is not a process. The word does not apply, it does not fit, so we'll reject it for that. What it is, what a better word is, I don't know. But time is not of the essence. Time is thought and tomorrow and my life yesterday and in the future. That's time. But this quiet walking in the woods on a snowy day in shared silence, not just the absence of words, but the absence of me there needing to be or to be someone else. To be something else. The absence of that has nothing to do with time, because it has nothing to do with thought, which creates time. And if one were to make such a statement about it, which I don't know how meaningful it is, but that can be trusted completely, unconditionally, because it is unconditioned. We will end here for today.